Anthropic has just released Claude Tag, and everyone is in a bit of an uproar about this. Karpathy had this huge tweet that recently came out. Before we get into that, I want to just talk about what this thing actually is and why it's more important than any other random Slack bot integration that may be out there. And there's a lot of misconceptions around what this is. First, let's just get the facts. Claude is now multiplayer. Before, when you were using Claude, it was more in like a single player mode. You were either in your terminal inside of Claude desktop, the chat mode on the web, and you're going back and forth with it. Yes, there were some team features, you could share skills, but most folks were not building their own Slack bot integrations and putting it inside of their Slack workspace because that required some finesse. We've seen it with Hermes, we've seen it with OpenClaude. You can add these agents to your workspace, but it does take some technical know-how to kind of make these things work, have a good memory system, and also be reliable over time. So the main complaint we were getting with things like OpenClaude and the Hermes is it's hard to secure, it's hard to maintain. We don't want to create a VPS. Making sure that Claude now is inside of Slack immediately gives you this multiplayer capability where people can kind of just pick up where someone else left off or actually ask it another question. Now, this isn't new. Devin had this functionality years ago, but Devin was like, I don't know, $500 a month or something. So no one really adopted it. I had Devin for a while. I was using it. I actually trialed it, and I found that that feature didn't really push the needle for me because at the time the models just weren't good enough. So it didn't matter that you could add your agent inside of one of these Slack bots because the agent kind of sucked. Now it's a bit different because Claude is so good, especially with Fable 5 coming back off of its ban. This is an actual new way of thinking about how work gets done. So the next piece here that gets called out is Claude really does learn over time. And this is the thing that makes OpenClaude and Hermes really appealing to a lot of people is that it will look at the work you're doing and say, hey, here is a skill that I think would make sense for your workflows, and it'll create that skill and implement it. Now, what Anthropic has done is they've shipped that feature basically using Claude Tag. And in this way, people can feel like, okay, as we're working, we don't have to have this central person whose job it is to create new skills for Claude. Instead, Claude can kind of learn in the background and create skills for itself and actually learn how we work instead of trying to always write everything out and create these really, really deep SOPs for how stuff works. Now, part of that is the way that's enabled is it's going to do this ambient behavior thing where it'll just proactively work on your behalf without you having to really think about it. So this is something that they say will be enabled if you enable it. And you do have to be careful because ambient behavior, like, what does that mean? Like, what is it going to do? What actions is it going to take? You're just going to have to be really tight around the permissioning with this type of feature here. And the bit that has me a little bit more excited is it works asynchronously, which means it can schedule tasks for itself. And with this, they've completed all of the features required to feel like Claude at this point is somewhat of an employee inside of your organization. And I think that is where Karpathy was trying to take the point, but a lot of people missed it because they're just saying this sounds like a basic Slack bot integration. It's not really the Slack bot integration part that's a big change here. It's really the approach they took in taking some inspiration from OpenClaude, taking some inspiration from Hermes agent, and then making it really simple inside of Slack because that's the number one user interface for enterprise right now. So most enterprises are using either Slack or Microsoft Teams. There's not many using Telegram. There's not many using WhatsApp. So OpenClaude Hermes was really good for the single player solo founder mode, but I think if you're going upstream into maybe even agencies as well, you do start to creep into Slack workspaces more, and that's their target market here with this, especially because Claude Tag is only available on the team plan. You do need a team plan to actually use this here. So here's a tweet from the announcement, And he's basically saying this is a new paradigm for interacting with Claude that is significantly more in line with all the other human activity org wide. Once you do all of the under the hood engineering work to make this just work across tools and integration, compute environments, memory, security, Claude basically joins the team in a seamless way. He then goes on to say this is the third major redesign of the LLM UI UX. And this is where a lot of people have some contention with this statement here. The first paradigm is the LLM is a website you go to. The second was it is an app you download to your computer. The third is that it is a self-contained, persistent, asynchronous entity with org-wide tools and context to work alongside teams of humans. And he did mention it's going to take a while to wrap your head around it, but it works and it is awesome. Now, to be fair, I don't think this actually takes a long time to wrap your head around. This is something that a lot of teams have already been doing. And what Karpathy is good at is he's good at surveying the landscape, seeing where all the bleeding edge folks are, seeing where all the laggards are, and then closing that gap. He's just really good at communicating, closing that gap. This is what he did with his videos on how to build an LLM from C in like 45 lines of code. So he's really just good at closing that gap for folks. But the reality is people who are on the bleeding edge for a long time have had this capability, have been thinking like this. Anthropic has done the hard work of putting in the infrastructure to make this an enterprise offering for some of the companies that need a hardened version of this. That's not just like, okay, I spent a weekend hacking away on OpenClaude and Hermes to build me a Slack bot, and now it has knowledge, it can query all my stuff, and it can, create YouTube titles and thumbnails for me. This is much more complicated than that in terms of infrastructure side and the security side. And we all know how Fable is coming back pretty soon. So when Fable comes back, the idea is the keyword here is entity. Now you have a entity working on your behalf without prompting, without a lot of direction. It can do things in the background. It can read your company's context, so it can probably do work for hours and days on end. This is where the calculus starts to change of how you use these agents. And I think he's right that this is the third major redesign of UI UX for LLMs. But the reality is this already happened 2 or 3 years ago. Cursor is probably one of the first companies to do this with background agents. Just no one used it. And the models just weren't good enough at that point. I really commend him for going out here and making this statement, but he absolutely got ripped to shreds for this, and he got a lot of pushback. And of course, someone just mentioned it, and I think they were kind of right. They got a lot of views and a lot of likes. Is there anything actually special here? I feel like this has already been a thing for a long time. I already have agents I can tag. Me too. I have the same thing set up in my Slack workspace where I can tag my own agents, and they all have a specific responsibility and context and all the things. So it can feel like this is not a net new thing, especially if you're someone who's a little bit more advanced. And he responds here that the basic idea is easy. It's a V0 hackathon project, which makes sense, right? Anyone can do this in a weekend. You can even prompt your agent right now to probably build something like this. Hey, agent, create a Slack bot for me, and that'll work pretty much one shot. He says what the product here is, he's saying, is the enterprise grade deployments. And if anyone's ever done enterprise grade development before, it is not trivial. There are a lot of complications when you're deploying something into enterprise versus if you're just deploying something for a startup or a personal project. And he said there's a lot of internal experimentation and iteration. It's hard to describe other than, per the post, it's writing a majority of the code. Deeply integrated in multiplayer. I think this is the bit here that a lot of people are going to miss as the important fact is the multiplayer bit. This is what gets me. This is what pulls me into what he's talking about here, because I've experienced the personal gain from AI, but when you try to share stuff with people or share skills and things, that's where it gets a little bit murky, and it's really hard to bring someone who is at a maybe more beginner level up to the level that you're at with AI, especially I'm sure you guys have experiences too. But when it's truly multiplayer and all they have to do is tag it, like it just breaks down the learning curve immensely because now you can just treat it as like a coworker and say, "Hey, I have this question," or "Hey, can you do this thing for me?" He even acknowledges it. Yeah, it's easy to dismiss as a quick reading of some like LLM, QA, RAG, or Slack. It's not even OpenClaude adjacent. He's right here. Like OpenClaude has, in terms of number of features, this is not anything new to OpenClaude. OpenClaude has this feature. It's just a different way of working. So he's saying it's a different way of working entirely for people and teams. I work from Slack now. If we go back to the original article here, Anthropic calls out that today 65% of our product team's code is created by our internal version of Claude Tag. That is not a trivial percentage. That's massive. So it's not only that they're doing most of their, so it's not only that they have 100% of their code probably being written by Claude. It's the fact that it's getting kicked off from Claude Tag. Now, they're careful here to not say it's all Slack. Maybe that's not true because I've seen Claude, this tagging Claude feature in a lot of other tools, especially in something like a linear. They've changed the way they code now. So I'm imagining people are not even looking at PRs at this point, and they're just tagging Claude in Slack. Claude says, I'm done. If there's any errors, there's errors. If there is something to look at, there's something to look at. But beyond that, they just move on with their day. So this is a really cool announcement. I think for me personally, I already have this functionality, so I'm not rushing to implement this inside my Slack workspace. Plus, I'm more of a single player, so I do everything pretty much on my own anyway, so I don't really need this feature. But if I was working with a client or someone who is looking at implementing this across their team, it's like a no-brainer. Just add it. You only need 2 team members minimum to add this, so I would just add it. Especially if you're an enterprise and you're already dealing with Anthropic, might as well just add this in. It's not going to hurt. It can only make things better. Now, the only other bit is people are going to have concerns around privacy, lock-in, security. That's up to the dealing with their enterprise team. But from the perspective of now I have this Claude employee in my organization. It knows so much about my organization. I've had it working here for a year. You're not going to switch off of that. That's primarily the reason why I don't even switch off the Claude ecosystem. I have so much stuff built up over time in Claude that switching over, maybe it's not that painful because you can easily rewrite all the skills, but it's just that little bit of friction that makes it, I'm just going to stick with what I have for now and not switch over. This is partly the reason why I have never used OpenClaude, I've never used Hermes, because one, I can already do all the things that I need in Claude, and two, like switching over would just be a pain. It'd be like a day and a half of setup that I would need to do, so I just don't want to do it. And I think that's where a lot of people are going to come from with Claude. They're making their move to exit their Claude code era and move into we want Claude to be a part of your team. We want it to be an integral part of your team where you feel like you cannot fire this thing and you have to keep it for a long time, even if other tools and other companies, other startups come up with crazy features and stuff. The fact that it's so embedded inside your team and in your workflow makes you want to keep it around. And I think they're going to kind of win on this strategy because they have some of the best models, especially with the Fable 5 coming out. It's going to be game over for a lot of startups where this was their proposition is we are an AI agent in your Slack. There's a lot of startups where this was their thing. I think it kind of kills that case unless they can come with some type of proprietary data to really back it up. So that's my thoughts, my raw thoughts on Claude Tag. I think it's really cool. Am I going to use it? Probably not. I'm not really the target demographic for this, but I think it does usher in the mainstream era of AI going multiplayer for teams. I'll see you in the next one.